Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back for more conversations. Our favorite political analyst, Doug Schoen, is with us. When candidates need a winning strategy, the first thing they ask is, where's my Doug Schoen? For the best decade or more, Doug has called the election races for us and has almost always called them accurately. Doug will predict for us who will take the White House in this important election year and who will win the House and the Senate. Doug will also tell us what are the issues of greatest concern to the voters and which candidates' policies are likely to work. We're pleased to welcome Doug Schoen back to the program. Well, I'm delighted to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
It's been a while. Now, your colleague, Nate Cohn, of the New York Times, the chief political correspondent, says this is going to be the closest election in modern times. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do. You know, as I look at the data, I look and reach the conclusion that it'll be like 2016 or 2020. Both very close elections went down to, 10, 15,000 votes in a couple of states. I think that's exactly where we're heading now. And anyone who says that they can predict with certainty what I'm going to do later, I think is a fool, or they have a crystal ball that I have yet to uncover.
Now, the polls were wrong in 2016.
Right.
They predicted that Hillary Clinton would vanquish Donald Trump.
Yep.
And they were wrong in some key states in 2020. Have they now refined their approach and methodology so that they become more reliable?
It's a very good question. And I suspect you did too, the article, I think it was in the New York Times in the last few days, saying that, in fact, methodologies had been developed to anticipate the issues that bedeviled pollsters generally in 2016 and, as you say, in swing states in 2020. Candidly, Jim, I don't think so. I do polling, obviously, day to day for a living. There are issues with how you draw a sample, how many people you reach online, through cell phones, whether Republicans are less likely to answer, whether Trump voters are less likely to answer. You know what? We honestly don't know. So while some pollsters say they fixed it, candidly, I don't believe that's the case.
Is there anything to the belief that some voters say they're independent? They tell the pollster they're independent because they're ashamed or reluctant to say they're for Trump.
I think that's absolutely true. There are a lot of voters who call themselves independent, but if you drill down and ask them what they think, you can predict how they're going to vote based on their issue constellation, where they live, what they read, what their activities are. Much of what people are going to do can be predicted.
Now, should it be as close as it is? I mean, here you have a prosecutor against a convicted felon. You have someone who incited an insurrection on January 6th, falsely said that he'd won the election in 2020. What is it that accounts for Trump's success?
There are really two things going on. First, people don't want Trump to return to the White House. They do, however, prefer his policies to those of Joe Biden and, by extension, Kamala Harris. Increasingly, they are more comfortable with Kamala Harris as the next president, but they have real doubts about her qualifications and the record of the administration she served in as vice president.
Harris has a huge lead among young voters, age 19 to 29, some of whom didn't vote or were ineligible to vote in the last election and weren't eligible to vote clearly in 2016. What accounts for this? And are they going to come out and vote?
The second question is a very tough one to answer. Will they come out and vote? The first question is equally challenging, though I think there are answers. I think that Harris appeals more to younger people than Biden or certainly Trump. I think the fact that she is a person of color benefits her. Her level of energy.
But also hurts her.
Well, it might, but I guess to me, her whole appeal has been one of somebody who, as she puts it, is a self-made member of the middle class. And I think that it is a uplifting story that on a personal level only enhances her credibility.
Do you think that, largely one has the feeling she's been playing defense and really hasn't gone on the attack the way she did in the debate with Trump, which I think the voters were delighted with. Lots of Trumpy people I know agree that she won the debate hands down. Do you think that's been a mistake for her and that she could move the needle if she now became more aggressive and took off the gloves?
I think her strategy and that of her advisors is, look, they believe she's narrowly ahead. They believe that she has better than a 50% chance of winning enough electoral votes with the swing states to be elected. They have real doubts about her ability to engage with Trump or engage with the media. And I think their feeling is their campaign is mostly working to position her or reposition her as a centrist. And their attitude is, let's keep going the way we are, gives us a good chance to win.
You think that's a mistake?
I think it is a rational adaptation. I think the one who's made a mistake is Trump by not running on the issues of the economy, the southern border, the direction of the country, and crime, issues that work to his advantage.
Now, traditionally in presidential elections, people talk about an October surprise, something that nobody anticipated, which can move the dial dramatically. I mean, we had that in 2016 when Jim Comey said he was opening up his investigation again because Hillary's emails had shown up on the computer of one of her aides' husband, who was kind of a discredited figure. So do you anticipate any October surprises in this election, or have we seen a few already?
Well, I was going to say that we may be seeing one as we tape this program, with the possibility that a wider Middle East war has been launched. The United States condemned what Iran is apparently contemplating. And if we get drawn into a conflict with Iran, it is absolutely impossible to predict what the consequences of that will be and what the electoral impact will be. So it could be something in the Middle East. And I dare say if the Chinese began military exercises in the Taiwan Strait, that might be another provocation as well.
But hasn't our history shown us that if we get involved in the war, even independent voters and voters on the other side will say, well, let's go with the administration because at this perilous time, we can't possibly change horses in midstream.
I think that's certainly possible that could happen. It's certainly what happened in 1962 in the midterm elections during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I really think we're in uncharted waters. I don't think anyone thought Trump was going to win. I think there are real doubts about both candidates and how this plays out, given the hurricane, given issues with potentially the supply chain, given the dock strike. We really don't know, Jim.
What about opening up the files that are now under seal in Washington in the case that Jack Smith brought when he's asked for permission of the court to open the files, which he says will reveal new levels of criminality on January 6th?
Well, I guess I'll say the following. You know, Trump is facing and has faced 4 indictments, hasn't affected his popularity. I would tend to doubt new levels of criminality per the special counsel is not going to change public opinion, but who knows? Impossible to say.
Do vice presidential debates play a role? Do you think they'll move the dial?
Typically they don't, and I tend to think that this is not going to have much, if any, impact.
Because you could look at 1988 when Lloyd Benson debated Quayle, Dan Quayle, and absolutely destroyed him. And yet Bush won the presidency with some 400 electoral votes.
That's exactly right. And, we all remember what Benson said. I knew John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was a friend of mine. You're no John F. Kennedy, talking to Dan Quayle, but Quayle became vice president and Lloyd Benson didn't.
Now, it would appear that Harris is going to win the popular vote.
That seems pretty likely.
Now, the swing states, of course, are dispositive because of the electoral college system. What's your appraisal, particularly of the 4 swing states, which I think Harris has to win: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and perhaps one other. And what's your appraisal of those states?
I would say Pennsylvania, from what I can see, I look at every poll, and I know you do too, there's virtually no difference between the candidates. It's within 1 point either way, and a number of polls have been ties at like 48-48 or 49-49. Wisconsin, I've seen probably more polls showing Harris ahead than I think maybe 1 or 2 showing Trump even, but I think she has a lead there. Michigan, I think it's perhaps a more narrow lead, but again, for her. And
Pennsylvania is a key state.
Pennsylvania, as I said, I think is a statistical tie. To me, I thought Nevada, because it's a downscale state, relatively few educated people, would break for Trump. It did against Biden. It has apparently now moved back in Harris's direction. Arizona, I think Trump's going to win because of the southern border. Georgia, again, very close, narrow Trump advantage. North Carolina, very hard to see anything in the polls, but who knows if the...
But you have the hurricane, and you have Mark Robinson, who was running for governor.
Both are what I was going to mention, and they certainly help. The hurricane helps Trump. Robinson hurts Trump.
Now, you mentioned the economy as being one of the central issues, and many political analysts say it is the central issue. Do you see any difference in the economic programs of the 2 candidates? They're both going to increase the deficit and increase the national debt, however they go about it.
Well, Trump is for cutting every tax possible, and Harris is for taxing billionaires. Neither is about balancing the budget or reducing the debt and the deficit. The big change in the polls, Jim, is that when the election began, Harris trailed Trump by some 15 points on handling the economy. That's now down to 4 or 5 points, and explains one of the reasons why she's doing marginally better.
Now, really, the economy is in a good place, quite ironically. Inflation has slowed. GDP has been constant, a record of constant growth throughout the Biden-Harris administration. We've cut interest rates. Inflation is down. What is the grievance against the Biden economy?
I think it's that prices went up 20-25% since Biden came into office. We've had an increase in interest rates, which is now reversed. And I think more people are having a tough time and are living paycheck to paycheck or not making ends meet on their paycheck than ever before.
But Trump wants to deport workers, which will have a depressive effect on the economy. He wants to increase tariffs to the point that there'll be no trade with China, and there'll be, in effect, a national sales tax of 20%, which will increase prices. And all economists say that's going to be terribly inflationary.
Well, I think most voters are not economists, and at this point, he is not Harris and he's not Biden, and I think that's what's emboldening people about his economic leadership. Also, conditions were better, in their estimation, when he was president than in Biden's almost 4 years.
Well, of course, he inherited an excellent economy from Obama. And it's true, he was cruising along all right until we had the pandemic. And Biden's administration has been, at least the first 2 years, a recovery from the pandemic. I mean, to what extent does who is sitting in the Oval Office affect inflation and affect the economy?
I think it matters a lot less than perhaps voters might think.
You have said really that the economic plans of either of the two candidates really don't mean very much to voters, except they have the sense that Harris's plans are more tax and spend and giveaways, but of course Trump's are as well. Do the economic plans of either of them make any sense to you?
Neither makes sense. Neither to me is responsible, and neither offers a way out of the challenges we face, in my estimation.
Now, what about the Veep picks, which is sort of a reflection of the judgment of the two candidates? Do you think Vance was a good selection?
I think it was the least good selection. I think had Trump selected Nikki Haley, this election would be over, but that's not who he is. Had he selected Marco Rubio, I think it would have been a much better choice than Vance. And on the Democratic side, I think given the primacy of Pennsylvania, she should have or could have picked Josh Shapiro, but I think she was very worried about a disagreement with him over the Middle East.
And so she picked Walsh, and Walsh was colorful. He said that the policies of the Republicans were just weird, and it was politics is often about a phrase or a turn of phrase, and that leveraged him to the vice presidency.
And also, he seems to be a go-along guy, a former football coach, teacher, affable, and I think Harris was more comfortable with him than she would be with, Josh Shapiro or Mark Kelly.
Do you think it's going to come down to the ground game? Will they be able to get the vote out? Particularly the Democrats have more money and more volunteers.
I think the real issue is, can the Republicans take advantage of the early vote? You know, they did something last time, Jim, that can only be called dumb. In the midst of a pandemic, Trump and the Republicans convinced themselves that voting early was somehow bad.
Okay, so we have races in the House and the Senate. We have 435 seats in the House, 218 needed for majority. 205 appear to be safely Democratic, 211 safely GOP, it appears. What do you think is going to happen there?
I would say very narrowly, given the advantages of incumbency, the Republicans will narrowly hold the House. But I think it will be 5 seats either way. So I think it's going to be very, very close. And given that not all Republicans and Democrats vote their party, it is going to be effectively a tie, whichever one wins.
And in the Senate, there are 33 seats that are up, and the Republicans need to flip only 2 out of the 33 in order to.
And right now, it's easy to see which 2 they would be Montana and West Virginia. Now, there's the possibility the Republicans could pick up Ohio, but otherwise,
Sherrod Brown is popular in the state.
He is, but the race is within 3 points. Now, in fairness, Ted Cruz's challengers within 4 points, Rick Scott's challengers within 3 or 4.
In Florida,
Yeah, but if I had to bet, I'd bet that the Republicans come out +1.
So there'll be a narrow Republican majority in both houses.
That would be my best guess, though I wouldn't be surprised if a narrow Republican majority in the Senate was also joined with a narrow, or even more narrow, if that's possible, Democratic majority in the House.
Now, what I'm understood that most recently, Ted Cruz has been losing ground to Colin Allred.
He has been.
Who was a very attractive candidate.
He's ahead, from what I can tell, Cruz, 1 or 2 points. I think about 2 points from what my recollection is.
So is there any chance that Allred could overtake him?
You know, we saw in the last election with Beto O'Rourke that the polls tend to underestimate the Republicans because they have an institutional advantage in terms of registration. I think a lot of Republicans come out and just pull the Republican ticket.
In Florida, you have Debbie McChrystal, and Rick Scott was the governor. Right. He's unpopular there.
He is.
It's said. I mean, is there a chance that she
there
can work an upset?
And the state is increasingly angry with Governor DeSantis, high housing, high insurance costs. So I think there's the possibility of a localized protest vote in Florida. But again, Scott has enormous resources. And if I had to bet, I'd bet on a very, very narrow Scott victory.
So do you see anything happening that will move the needle, either in the House or the Senate or in the presidential race?
You know, interestingly, and it's not been commented on much, Jim, Trump in 2020, as in 2016, had momentum as the election approached. For all his craziness, Trump is a very good closer with his rallies, with his enthusiasm, his urgency. If he closes well, that will give the Republicans new impetus in the House and Senate. So one of the reasons the Republicans did win the House was because Trump in 2020 brought out Republicans who otherwise were probably not going to vote. That could well happen again. I haven't seen evidence that Trump is focused and mobilized, but I would guess, based on past experience, that he'll close better than Harris.
What about immigration? Is the immigration issue off the table in light of the fact that there was a bipartisan immigration bill which Trump personally blocked so that the Democrats wouldn't have a campaign issue?
I don't think it's off the table, but with fewer immigrants, illegal immigrants crossing now, and that bill, I think the issue is less salient than it's been previously. So I don't think it has the strength that it might have 6 months ago.
So let's take a hypothetical guy that owns a gas station in Kansas. Probably, maybe Kansas is a bad example because it's always been a red state, but in one of the blue states, let's say Colorado or Nevada, and he's for Trump. Why is he for Trump? What accounts for that?
Usually cultural, probably comparative economic ratings, and some sense that Trump is tough on crime in a way that arguably Harris may not be.
Okay, well, you of course are familiar with the historian at American University, Alan Lichtman.
I am.
Who has predicted correctly 9 of the past 10 presidential elections. He's called it for Harris.
I am aware.
And so the time has come to ask you the question, Doug Schoen, who is going to be the next president of the United States?
You know, right now, I would say that Kamala Harris is likely to be the next president. A couple of caveats. First, there is room for Trump to pick up enough support to, particularly in the swing states, to turn that around. But so far, his candidacy has been so inept, he's being outspent so enormously that I think again, the betting odds are about 52-48 in her direction, and that would be how I would assess it as we sit here today.
Do you think he's going to claim that the election was rigged and there was a fraud? There'll be lawsuits. Of course, the difference between now and 2020 is that he doesn't control the government.
But I do think his supporters are more geared up to find abuses, real or imagined. So I think it's going to be another disputed election.
Would you expect political violence?
It's certainly possible. I hate to have to say that, and I very much pray that I'm wrong.
Trump recently made a statement that there would be bloodshed,
I'm aware of that, and
a day of bloodshed.
He usually is not subtle,
No, he's not subtle.
nor obfuscatory.
So I think we've come to the end, and I want to thank you for coming by. This has really been marvelous.
My pleasure.
It's always great to hear you, and your analysis is always so much spot on and in point. And so thank you for coming by.
You.
Thank you for coming by. And don't forget to download the CUNY TV app to your mobile device so you can hear more conversations and more of the wonderful CUNY TV programming. Tune in next week for more conversations. I'm Jim Zirin. Meanwhile, take care, be well, and all the best.